Hello and welcome back to Stones That Speak. Today I want to rehearse some ideas that I have already touched on in previous videos on this channel, but I found myself really ruminating on them more recently, and the trigger for this chain of thoughts was listening to a podcast that I'm subscribed to from a gentleman named Michael Heiser. If you are not familiar with Michael Heiser, he is relatively famous for getting Christians excited about weird stuff in the Bible. Mostly demons, angels, gods, sons of God coming down and cohabitating with the daughters of men, like digging into all of the Second Temple Enochian literature. It's great stuff. I love it. He's doing great work. It's a fantastic podcast, and he's really interesting to listen to. He has a lot of scholarly resources at his fingertips, so you can listen to his commentaries where he digs into like tiny minutia on things that maybe you never even thought about when you were just reading the Bible, and he does a great job of pointing things out. And in the most recent episode, as of this recording, of Michael Heiser's podcast, the Naked Bible Podcast, he reacts to a book by a gentleman named John Walton, and John Walton's son, actually. It is this book right here, Demons and Spirits in Biblical Theology, reading the biblical text in its cultural and literary context. John Walton is actually not new to this kind of work. He has a number of books about the literary genre that would have been present in the Genesis narrative and the Exodus narrative, and really pointing to the literary methods that are being employed by the biblical writers. And I think that that is a useful thing. I think that that is a good tool to have in the toolbox. But you can use that tool too much and too far. And the problem with the approach of the Bible as literature is that you are then thinking maybe I'm free to abandon the Bible as historical narrative. Not historical necessarily in the sense that we might think of, I have a textbook of history which purports to be sort of this God's eye view and nobody's perspective in particular, and everybody's viewpoint is equally represented, or we do our best to do that, but still, like, that it has some basis in reality at some point once you go too far into the literary genre thing. And they do this with the idea of demons and spirits, and presumably angels, although having listened to the Reaction podcast, they don't go into angels as much in this book. But I haven't read the book myself. I'm just going off of the reaction that Michael Heiser put out. And I'll let him talk for a minute and describe his problems with the Waltons approach here. So let's hear what Michael has to say.
So Ferr starts his review this way. He says, John H. and J. Harvey Walton address the subject of biblical demonology by dialoguing with two widespread interpretive approaches, demythologizing and conflict theology. Their primary aim is to critique the latter, that is, conflict theology. That's what they really have in their crosshairs. Ferr says, so their primary aim is to critique the latter, a position associated with conservative evangelical theology that affirms the real personal existence of demons and Satan and interprets biblical references to these entities as a system of propositional truths and instructions for spiritual warfare. Let me just stop there. I mean, that much would be me. Yeah, I accept the personal existence of demons and Satan And I do think the Bible teaches us propositional truths about what demons and Satan do, and they're what they are by nature, their activities, and so on and so forth. The Waltons are going to object to that. So, like right out of the gate, again, it's a very strange thing for an evangelical scholar to be writing. The book is not about me. It's not a response to me. I'm barely mentioned in the book. It's more or less when they spend their time, again, critiquing conflict theology, which is, again, a theology that accepts Satan and demons as real, and the Bible actually teaches us stuff about them. That's what they're shooting at. And most of the time they're shooting at Pentecostalism or Greg Boyd. They're not shooting at me.
Okay. So, I clicked the wrong thing here. So, just to be clear, this is an hour and 43-minute podcast. I played for you like a couple minutes here of Michael sort of giving the overview. Here's what the two Waltons are doing. They are saying, demons ain't real. This is just like a figure of speech, a literary genre. And I am not going to play the whole podcast here. It is a lovely listen, all right? Because for like 45 minutes, Michael Heiser just rips these guys apart. He goes passage by passage by passage and talks about how important it is to biblical, theological, soteriological truth to believe in spirits and angels and gods and demons. These are fundamental elements of the faith. The demons and the evil gods are one of the primary things that the New Testament says that we are saved from. And Michael Heiser is really going to have a hard time with these guys being like, yeah, no, but like, it's just figurative. It's just like they don't really mean it, guys. It's not a propositional truth. Great, great, great work that Michael does. Absolutely destroying this. But I want to play you a section from later on in the podcast. And I want to comment on where I think the narrative has gone wrong. Because I think the narrative has somewhat gone wrong. And there's a split here that shouldn't have happened the way that it happened. And it's the problem with the Waltons coming at this topic in this way is rooted in the way that they come at the previous topics that they have written on, about creation, about the Exodus narrative, about this whole idea of applying a literary genre and saying, see, this is really what the biblical authors are doing, and thinking that you can leave it there. Not that you can't get something out of that, but that this sort of gets you out of some problems that we have in the modern era between creationism and scientism. And so I'm going to skip forward a little bit and let Michael talk some more.
Genre is not a place to hide, to avoid truth content. Now, ultimately, what the Waltons are doing is, let's go back to the cosmology point. We have to go back to this before we wrap up here. They're associating, in the Old Testament, you have cosmology that we don't accept because of our science, right? Round, solid dome. You've heard me talk about this before. This is nothing new, okay? And there are demons in the Old Testament associated with weather, okay, and plague, like Ketev and Dever and Habakkuk 3. And so what the Waltons are doing is, well, we don't accept this cosmology, and therefore we don't have to accept what the Bible says about Satan and demons. Again, the Bible teaches us the universe, earth, weather, also reject about supernatural conflict and the beings involved in that. Again, I would ask, does that both good and bad guys? But again, I don't want to stray too far because this is where they're at. This is their test case. This is what they think is their linchpin argument. I actually think it's a great weakness because it's methodologically inconsistent and it's going to fail. The reason we reject Old Testament cosmology is not genre, it's science. We can justify rejecting, this kind of cosmology and associating demons with plagues and diseases and things like that. We can justify that because we have science, and we have science because of what? A biblical idea called the dominion mandate. This is be fruitful and multiply, go subdue the earth, this whole mandate.
Okay. So here's this Michael Heiser trying to cover his bases, because Michael Heiser likes what the Waltons do to or with creationism. To say, aha, yes, well, we know back then that those people didn't know what we know. Which is true, by the way. Alright? There is knowledge that we have currently that was not possessed by the ancient audience of the Bible. Now, here's the leap that Heiser and the Waltons make. The Waltons make it consistently. I think Heiser's backtrack here, trying to save his demons, but also save sort of modern science, is not as solid as he wants to make it. Because I will paraphrase generally. He's saying, well, the natural world, yes, we can make measurements about, and we can understand specific things about, and that's all fine. But demons, they're off in some other world, and so science can't say anything about them, so we can trust the Bible. I think that's a weak argument. For several reasons. How do I want to start building this argument well? Let's talk about demons. Okay, let's talk about how the demons are actually represented in the Bible. Because if you'll look at how the Bible narrative treats Satan, the big baddie demon of all demons, it's not consistent. It develops over time. The initial intrusion of Satan into the biblical narrative is he's not identified as anything in particular really special. He's just the serpent. Now, his actions are incredibly impactful, and he's given this special curse, and there's the whole Messiah promise that comes with that at the very beginning. And so we can look at it and understand, okay, wow, like this is going to fit into this narrative in a certain way. But you have to understand that this story is coming from a culture with talking animal spirits as a regular part of their spiritual experience. That type of culture, arguably it still exists. In fact, I've spoken to people recently, like, white, Western norm, I don't want to go too far on the normal side of things, but, regular modern people who claim to speak with animal spirits. The Norse pagan guys, I love them. I do legitimately love them, and also they're very interesting to speak with because at least they're clued into the existence of the spirit world, and in a way that I think some Christians aren't, or at least, and it's fair to not want to be in contact with that world too much on the negative side. I understand that we should have some trepidation there, but your Norse pagan guys, there's just straight, like, jacked right into all that animal spirit stuff. And so we have this narrative of Adam and Eve interacting with this powerful animal serpent spirit. How are we supposed to interpret that? Like, you can sort of go back and try to figure out, okay, was it a physical serpent? Was the serpent, like, possessed by the spirit of Satan? Was the serpent a spirit the whole time? You can ask all kinds of questions, but I mean, this is a sort of classic trickster animal myth, right? The trickster animal comes, messes up what's going on with the people, leaves, sort of going on his way. Loki fits into this pattern. In Africa, there's a spider guy who's going around doing all this stuff. All right, so you have this understanding, this sort of animal spirit understanding of this evil spirit. Well, then you move forward and you have this evil spirit doing different things and being understood in different ways. There's other serpents that show up. They're now made of fire and they have wings. Well, the wings come later, but at least they're made of fire when they attack the children of Israel in the camp. We can assume that there's some linkage back to the main serpent, but we don't know. But they're still able to, in some sense, interact with these animal spirits. Or maybe they're physical animals that have been indwelled by demons. But regardless, it's that kind of narrative. But then later on in the book of Job, well, now we have a different understanding of Satan. Now we have this sort of the Satan, as some people like to point out, if you want to get particular about the way the original translation was. And now we have this, like, courtroom accuser kind of character. Well, he's not a snake. He's just some angel up there in heaven who's pointing out, like, this guy was really screwing up, God. You probably should judge him. Yeah, that guy, he's doing pretty okay, but, like, yeah, sure, you gave him everything, whatever. All right, so all of a sudden, now you have a different understanding of Satan. If you go forward into Isaiah, you have this, like, Lucifer, son of the morning. All of a sudden, he's in the heavenlies, and he's depicted by this star, but he's going to fall, and, like, all of these other types of images. There is an evolving understanding of this spirit world. Adam and Eve did not have access to every single one of these images of the great accuser of the brethren, this great evil serpent, this Leviathan that encircles the world and is cast down from heaven. Jesus sees him fall like lightning from heaven, and John sees him as, you know, the serpent who's being slain by the woman, and, like, all of this stuff, okay? They didn't have access to all that stuff. There was new knowledge that came about the demons, about the prince of demons, that the people who got that knowledge, who understood more things about Satan, about the great accuser, and who knows what names he's gone under throughout the years. The specifics of that are not important. What is important is that the Bible authors did not look at the knowledge that they had about the great spiritual adversary of humankind and say, you know, he's not appearing as a serpent to us, so Adam and Eve must have been wrong. Or that must have been just a genre that, like, we don't actually have to trust them that there was like a serpent thing that they saw somehow and experienced. And again, let's not quibble too much about whether there was a physical snake that got inhabited or it's a spiritual being that is a snake, because there are spiritual beings that are snakes all through, especially the earlier parts of the Old Testament. All right. Like, they don't see a disconnect there. It's all part of one narrative. You continue to develop, we have new knowledge, we have this more understanding, our consciousness is now engaging with this spiritual world in a different way, but we don't chuck out the old stuff. Isaiah doesn't, like, write down, how art thou fallen, Lucifer, thou son of the morning, and by the way, Adam and Eve were wrong about that whole serpent thing. We don't believe that anymore. He's still fine with having Genesis in the Bible and talking about it like it's just as valid a source of information as anything else, but also saying, we have this new stuff. He's the son of the morning. He's also the accuser and the person who tempted David to sin in Kings, or maybe it's 2 Samuel. I'm sorry, not Kings. But regardless, like the great sin that David commits by numbering the people, like that's Satan and God, and that's a whole nother rabbit trail we won't go down. But all of these understandings develop. They're not there at the beginning. The earliest people don't have them. We get them as knowledge increases, and yet the old knowledge does not become untrue. Now, let's move that forward into our understanding of the rest of the world. We have this idea that we can get the complete knowledge about something by loosely speaking, by moving closer to it. Right? There is a classic Greek thought experiment about the tower that appears round at a distance, but when you come up closer to it, you realize, oh, but it is actually square. And the Greeks use this argument to say, aha, see, our senses can deceive us. And you can understand this, right? From like a practical point of view, you say, oh, well, I saw something from far away. It looked like that from far away. But then when I got closer, I realized it was not that thing, or it was different than I thought. And so then I understood the true reality of what the thing was. When I was far away, I could not understand it, but now I understand it better. But there's a problem with that approach. Let's take the tower that looks round from far away and square when you get close up. If the far away roundness is an illusion created by the fault of your eyes, there is no reason to assume that the close-up squareness is not also an illusion created by a fault of your eyes. You're getting both pieces of information from your eyeballs. So what changed? Why is it that when you get up to the close to the tower, you say, aha, it turns out it was square all along. The squareness is more real to you. It is more true than the roundness you saw far away. I would argue that the reason that you accept that as a greater reality than the roundness from far away is because when you are close to the tower has different utility to you than when you're further away. When you are standing at the faraway hilltop and seeing the tower as round, the tower is only available as a visual representation. As you get closer to the tower, you are now able to do other things with the tower. First of all, you can touch the tower, right? You can interact with the tower. But more importantly, the tower now becomes useful to you. You can enter the tower. The tower can shelter you from rain or from sunlight or from wind. The tower can be a place of refuge. The tower becomes something that is useful to you in a way that it was not when you were further away. And so instinctively, you say, now that I am close up, this view is more real. It's from the same lying eyes that gave you the view far away that said the tower was round, but now those eyes that are closer are also interacting with other parts of your potential being that can now use this tower in a particular way. But there is utility in the round tower. Don't forget the faraway tower. Let's say you're hypothetically a gunner, right? Like you're trying to shoot artillery out at this tower. So you're going to lob shells at this tower. If you want to lob shells at this tower and blow it up, I would submit to you, the round tower is much more useful to you than the square tower. Why? Because if you get up close to the square tower, you're going to blow yourself up when you put the shell on it because you're right there. All of a sudden, you're right on top of it. You're going to see the round tower real close. That's a problem. Now, the round tower has more utility to you because you're trying to be far away from it to blow it up. So, the argument here is that the round tower is no more incorrect than the square tower. The only argument that you can make is that you are being honest about the feedback from your senses and that you are able to interact with the thing that you're getting the feedback from in a particular way. That this thing is present to you for a particular use and in a particular sense. Now, let's talk about ancient cosmology and modern cosmology. Ancient cosmology says the universe looks like this picture I got behind me. Okay? You look up at the stars and you see them moving through the sky. And then you see special lights moving through the sky and you say, aha, those lights move differently than the rest of the lights. There must be something special about them. That one bright light that obliterates all the other lights, that guy is super cool. And then there's this other relatively bright light comes out at night. She's neat too. And then look at all these little guys that are kind of moving, flitting back and forth, and we don't know what they're doing, but they don't move like the rest of the stars. Those guys, they're super weird. Let's count them up. Which one of these guys are moving weird? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 different guys. Wow, that's impressive. We're going to really dig down on the number 7. All right? You should know that when you go through the days of the week, you're going through the planets. The classical planets, all right? Of which the sun and moon are one, and Pluto and Uranus and Neptune are not. Okay, so let's just stop and do this for fun, because I always try to quiz myself. Sun for Sunday, moon for Monday. Tuesday is Jupiter. Wednesday is Mercury, because it's in the middle. Flits around, messenger of the gods. Very easy to remember that one. Thursday, that's Thor, god of war for Mars, right? So you have Thor and Mars kind of conflated there. Friday, that's Freya's day. Freya is conflated with Venus, all right? And then Saturday, very easy to remember that one, for Saturn's day. Tu is the one that's really hard to remember because, like, nobody thinks about the god Tu and how he's associated with Jupiter, but you can sort of, by process of elimination, remember him. All right, so those are your 7 classical planets. All right? That's how the ancient person saw the world. All right? And then they developed an understanding of the world based on that view. All right? Water comes down from above. It's not always coming down from above, so something must be stopping it from coming down from above. So there's stuff up there that is halting it from coming down, and we're all good. And they build this, let me see how I'll get the picture I want here. Here it is. Old Testament cosmos. Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. Here we go. All right. I'll go the right way. All right, so you get this idea, all right? And then there's the underworld underneath of us. You got death and hell down there and Tartarus and all the bad places. And also just the places where, like, the grave is also sort of an idea in the ancient world where, like, you're not getting tortured, really, like sort of the modern idea of hell, where you're just burning up all the time, but you're just kind of like existing in this blah, gray, featureless waste. Still not great, but whatever. All right, so this is the view and understanding of the world that you can develop from standing on the earth and looking out and experiencing things as they are, as the stars turn, and you can participate with them. I mean, the obvious and most easy one that everybody still does is like, the sun comes up. Oh, I feel like I'm awake now. Now it is time to do my work. The sun is here. There is light. Oh, the sun went down. Now I am sleepy. It is tired time. I will go to bed. Unless you're one of those people that has to work overnight. I've done that before. I feel your pain. But you still participate in the day-night cycle, even if you can't wake when the sun wakes and go to bed when it goes to bed. You're still in that world, all right? But for an ancient person, you would also have things like, oh, the dog star went under the horizon. That means it's time to start planting or harvesting, or I'm not an ancient person, so I don't know all the specifics, but you would watch the constellations and they would go different places in time of the year, and you would understand, this means this. It's time to do this. I need to act out the pattern of my life in the correct way with the heavens so that I can continue to exist. This is a real thing, all right? We're talking about the actual way that the universe lays itself out for people every day. You can go outside if it is nighttime or if it is daytime and look up at the sky and see, for instance, the sun going around the earth. You might argue, but the earth just turned that it looked like. No. Look. Forget about that. You can watch the sun come up. If you say to someone, I saw a beautiful Earth rotating to reveal the sun today, it was so amazing, they're going to be annoyed with you, at the very least. They're probably going to not even understand what you're talking about, because what they want to hear you say is, I saw a beautiful sunrise. Or, if it's at the other end of the day, you don't say, I saw a beautiful Earth rotating to occlude the sun. You say, I saw a beautiful sunset. Because that's what the sun does for you. Now, there's another model of the universe. That's not the right one. Here we go. This is the one. Here we go. The solar system. Now, this is the one that you have had pounded into your brain for who knows how many years. Alright, you had to go to school and learn about this crap. They told you Pluto was a planet for a long time, and then he wasn't. And you're like, what's up with that? I'm kind of mad. Alright, we'll get into Pluto actually maybe in a minute. But here's what you have been told the actual universe is like. You have the sun in the middle and all these planets going around it, and here's Earth. It's the third one out. We also have Uranus and Neptune. You can't see those. Right? You look up in the sky, you want to see Uranus and Neptune, not going to happen. You have to get a telescope. You have to get special equipment to start seeing these guys. These guys are all visible, all right? And then when Pluto was around, you really couldn't see him with the telescope. I mean, you probably kind of could with the telescope. I mean, we definitely couldn't see with a naked eye. So this is the model that everybody has been trained to say, that's the real one. That's the real one. No, this is the sun coming up and the stars traveling through the sky. Not what's really going on. I am enlightened. Now I understand that this is the real model. All right. But think back to the tower. Right? The tower from far away and the tower up close. Both of the towers had their uses. Right? If you wanted to blow up the tower or shoot an arrow at the tower, it was useful for you to be looking at the round tower. But if you wanted the tower to be a shelter to you, then it was useful to be looking at the square tower. Neither one of those towers is the real tower. It's only the tower that you can interact with in a different way. So, here is this model of the universe that you've never, ever, and I want to be clear about this, you and no one else, and not even a robot, has ever observed directly this model of the universe. No one has ever, because think about what we're looking at here. Think about where we are looking from to see these concentric circles, which are not actually accurate, but we'll be cool with that. You're many, 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 many thousands of miles directly above the sun, in a vacuum, maybe in a spaceship. Alright? Let's hope that you have a spaceship. But if not, you're really in trouble to look at the universe from this perspective. Things are not going well for you if you end up seeing this. Gotta use my screen. If you end up seeing this picture, you're in a bad time. Things have not worked out. Okay? So, your default assumption that this picture here is more real than when you look up at the night sky and you see the sun rise and the sun set. That's a problem. Right? That is a artifact of the modern world. To think that our new knowledge has negated the old knowledge. Alright? Let me use a different example, alright? Let us say that my wife, I've been married to her for 14 years now. I can interact with my wife in many ways. Right? I can talk to her, I can hug her, alright? I can be mad at her, right? These are all there's just a many myriad ways that I can be in communion with my wife. where we are together. She is a human person, and I am a human person, right? And I see her as a human person. But let us suppose that I am relatively ignorant, and one day I get a microscope, and I just so happen to be interested in pointing at things, and I pointed at my human wife, and all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute. This isn't a human wife. This is a collection of cells. I done been tricked this whole 14 years. I thought she was a person, and now there's all these cells here. I'm leaving. Obviously, that's ridiculous. Obviously, that's a really stupid way to act. The new knowledge about the cells that exist within my wife, and if we go further down, the atoms that exist within my wife, does not negate the fact that my wife is a person that I can interact with, that I can hug, right? That I can have the good sexy times with if we're both feeling it, right? The cells don't negate that. The new knowledge about the cells and the atoms and the, like, particles in the atoms, none of that takes away from the fact that my wife is a person and is a real person, and that is a real way, a legitimate way, and I would argue the most legitimate way for me to interact with my wife. Now, that doesn't mean that the knowledge of my wife as being composed of cells is bad knowledge. We don't have to, like, deny the existence of cells to keep my wife around. We don't have to deny the existence of atoms, right? We can have those things, and they may be useful. The cellular level of my wife, it's not really much use to me on an everyday basis. But if she gets cancer, I sure hope somebody is decently good at interacting with the cellular level of people in general, and my wife in particular. I'm gonna hope that they give her some stuff that works for her cells and does bad things to the bad cells in her to improve her health, because I want my whole wife to be still there. Alright? The model of the universe, right? The solar system here. This is not a bad model. It's perfectly reasonable and rational to talk about the universe in this way if you need to interact with the universe in this way. You want to build the Parker Solar Probe, or like a moon lander, or something like that. This is the model you need. Alright? This model right here won't do so good for you. You're going to crash your lunar probe. You're not even going to build it because you're thinking maybe I'm going to bonk into that ocean up there. To deny the scientific cosmos, that's going to give you some problems. You won't have as rich of a toolkit for interacting. But that toolkit is not the primary, most useful way for you to interact with the universe. And so the Old Testament cosmos, right, this idea of the solid dome overhead, of the firmament, of the deep above, all right, all of these things that are obvious outgrowths of direct experience of how things work are not negated by the existence of other scientific understandings. And by the way, once you go down this road, you do start to chip away at the demons. Right? Because if you start to look at the new scientific knowledge as trumping the old, dumb, sort of upper level knowledge, then you look at let's say some of the healings that Jesus does, of the boy who has the seizures and casts himself into the fire. And you say, well, no, we know scientifically we understand that wasn't really a demon. Because we know what seizures are, and we can map the neurons. We can map the neurons and how they work, and there's not demons. It's just neurons. Alright? But you're still making the same mistake, okay? Because you're still making the, it's not my wife, it's just cells mistake. The fact that the cells exist, the fact that you know about the cells and can do something about the cells does not disprove the existence of my wife. The fact that you know about neurons and how they fire does not disprove the existence of demons. Just gives you a different method of attack, a different way of understanding how the world is put together, a different toolkit. But you need to remember that that toolkit is limited, and that the toolkit of your everyday average experience is not inferior to that. In general, you have to be wise. You can't just like blow off any modern medicine and say, oh, well, they're trying to give me a pill, but I'm gonna, like, walking around outside is all good for me, and I haven't seen any germs. I don't know anything about microscopes, so I'm not even going to worry about washing my hands. Okay, see here, that now you're making an error, because there are germs, right? You do need to wash your hands, but you also need to understand that the things you can see that are made out of germs, like the larger patterns, also do actually exist. One does not override the other. And this is the problem with approaching the creation story and the Old Testament cosmology with your, well, now science understands differently. No, it doesn't. It understands more. It understands another perspective. But it doesn't disprove anything any more than the existence of cells disproves the existence of my wife. And this is I think really what the Catholic Church back in the day was worried about when they were fighting atomism. I didn't understand this when I first encountered the objections to atomism from the church. I thought, well, obviously these are some backwards idiots. What could they possibly be thinking? But I've since realized that what they were thinking was, people are going to look at the atoms and say, ah, this is what's really there, and this upper level stuff is not really there. Right? The whole Democritus on the nature of things, de rerum naturam, his whole argument is, only by convention is it bitter and sweet. Only by convention is it hot and cold. But in reality, atoms and void. Democritus missed it. It is, in reality, hot and cold. It is, in reality, bitter and sweet. But sure, yeah, there's atoms too. That's also true. That is also a reality that can be interacted with and used to our benefit. You don't have access to the past. You can't be there. You don't get a time machine. So you have to make up a story. It's always a story. It always leaves something out by necessity. It always leaves most things out by necessity. Any story about anything leaves like nearly 100% of all the facts in the universe out. Weather on Mars, temperature of the great spot on Jupiter, what some orbiting black hole is doing over in some galaxy that we haven't even discovered yet, temperature of some baby that was born in China 2 minutes ago. Alright, if I tell a story, I neglect all of that. It does not mean I am telling a lie. It does not mean that there has been some wool pulled over our eyes, and boy, if we just knew, if we just included the temperature of the great spot on Jupiter, at the average temperature, obviously, because, you know, there's a different temperature in the middle and the outside. see how far you can break this down? If we had that, then we would have really had our story. Then we would have really understood what was happening when Napoleon fought at Waterloo. Nope. No. That's not how any of this works. Do not give these it's just genre people one single inch when it comes to talking about truth. Right? Because they do not understand. They are stuck in this mode of thinking that the new knowledge supersedes the old knowledge. It does not. Your everyday experience is still a valid way of seeing the universe. The Bronze Age cosmos is still a perfectly valid way of seeing the universe for most operations. For operations like, again, building the Parker Solar Probe. Then don't use that. Not a great model all of a sudden. For 99% of people who aren't building the Parker Solar Probe, it would actually be good if you could see the stars at night and they weren't blotted out by your street lights. Because you would understand something better. But we got our model, right? We saw this in school 20 years ago, or 50, you know, who knows how long ago. And we said, I got it. And then we just stopped participating with anything up there. And we think we can do that with everything. With the creation story, with demons, with angels. But they're gonna come and get you. They're coming to get you, Barbara. That's all I have for this episode. I hope that I didn't wander too much or speak too unclearly. I know this is a difficult concept to get from a modern standpoint. I tried to explain it to my father about the 7 planets and how there are 7 planets, and yes, there are 9 or 8 masses that orbit the sun that we have chosen arbitrarily to be planets, but then also there's a bunch of other masses that orbit the sun that we aren't saying are planets because they're different size. And we used to say that one was important, right? Pluto, but then we found a bunch more that were about that size, and we're like, oh no, we can't actually call all these planets because planets have to be something special? Why? Why do they have to be something special? Why can't we have 80 billion planets? Because there's probably that many rocks up there orbiting the sun. So why does it need to stay a manageable number and be a certain size? It's arbitrary. It's arbitrary because we're still imposing order on the world. We're still excluding a bunch of information, but them being like, those Bronze Age people, they didn't have all the information we have, and so they were dumb. They were dumb because they excluded some information. They didn't even know this stuff. What's the name of the particle that's whizzing by Venus right now? It's like about this big. It's going to go along Venus. You're not going to name it, right? You're not going to come up with an explanation for that particle or a reason why it exists or like any stories about it. You're going to look at the big stuff and say, oh, what's going on with that big spot on Jupiter? I got to figure that out. Because you're imposing meaning every second, all the time. Don't diss ancient people for doing it too. They weren't wrong. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll see you next time.